But a little bit further down, Eisner asks the questions, well, how specific should these objectives be? If we are going to have like expressive outcomes or problem-based or behavioral objectives, how specific should they be? And so Eisner does some quick math and basically says that if we start adding in more and more objectives for each one of the lessons across the course of a week, we might have hundreds of objectives that students are going to be engaging in. But rather than having teachers focus on all of those objectives for all of the different standards in all of the different subject areas they might teach, Eisner instead recommends focusing on other areas because teachers deal with far more than just the standards and the objectives that are written on the board at the front of the classroom. Quote, these objectives are not found in lists. They are not written, although some school districts have compiled such lists of objectives in notebooks the size of the New York City telephone directory. These objectives are a part of the personal and psychological repertoire that teachers draw on each day when working with students, end quote. It's from page 106. A little bit further down on 106 and into 107, quote, consider for a moment the range of problems, content, context, and individuals with which a teacher must deal. Not only must there be some sense of purpose or direction to the activities in which teachers are engaged, but also the priorities among those projects must be considered, altered, or sustained. When does a teacher, for the time being, wisely forget about the goal of helping a student learn to spell a set of words correctly or learn how to punctuate an adverbial clause and instead attend to other aims that are also a part of his or her aspirations for the student but not an explicit part of that particular segment of the curriculum? When does a teacher choose to make educational capital out of unexpected opportunities in the classroom, an offhand remark by a student, or a keen insight by another, and in so doing, depart from his or her previously specified objective? All of these happen in classrooms, at least those that are not rigidly tied to a set of single-minded aims. In particular, elementary classrooms often acquire their own tempo. The students become immersed in what was to be a casual, short-term project. And teachers often yield to such tempo, recognizing the need for an organic as contrasted to a mechanical treatment of time. Thus, from one point of view, 845 objectives are far more than any teacher can reasonably be expected to focus on. 420 would be equally difficult. Yet at the same time, teachers operate with thousands of objectives in the form of their aspirations for the student with whom they work. The major difference is that their latter aims are implicit and contextual rather than explicit and prepared prior to the specific context in which they are to teach, end quote. Now, this is a really, really, really important thing to consider. There is a lot of discussion going on because of generative AI and just AI in general. And in this discussion, some people are hypothesizing that there's not going to be a need for teachers in the future, that we're just going to have AI and programs and whatnot make it so that we can have custom experiences for students so that they can learn how to solve problems. And if they're engaging in a problem that's difficult, it will identify and find the best solution, yada, yada, yada. And if, again, we treat students as inert objects, sure, that approach works great. But if we recognize that students are human beings, we might come to a different conclusion. Maybe, just maybe, AI is not the solution to education. But that's my own perspective, and you can disagree with me on this podcast. There's a contact me button on my website, jaredoleary.com. I'd love to have you on as a guest. But there is a book by Audrey Waters that is titled Teaching Machines, The History of Personalized Learning. I recommend taking a look at that. This has actually gone on for decades and decades. It's a really interesting concept to consider.